Chapter 1. First Encounter. Lianzhan. Lianzhan. Wait for me. I found a big target this time, Wudong called out. Lianzhan ignored him, walking ahead with downcast eyes. They traversed the bustling streets and arrived at a small thatched cottage, which, though small, had all the necessities. Lianzhan pushed open the fence gate and entered the yard, heading into the house alone, without acknowledging Wudong. Wudong, who was about the same age as Lianzhan, had grown up with him. Both 9-year-old boys lived together in this small yard. They had no parents, and in this war-torn era, they were long orphaned and displaced. Wudong was puzzled by Lianzhan's behavior today. Scratching his head, he couldn't figure it out and decided to let it go. Inside the house, Lianzhan lay on a simple bed, eyes closed, recalling the events of the previous night, which still gave him chills. It all started when he went to a newly moved-in wealthy household in Suqing. This family was indeed much larger than any of the so-called wealthy families he and Wudong had visited before. The reason for his visit, of course, was to steal. He and Wudong were renowned in the area as master thieves. Their renown was due to their exploits. If anyone knew their true identities, they wouldn't survive. Lianzhan was more agile than Wudong. The more Lianzhan thought about it, the angrier he got. He had roamed the streets for years but was caught last night. Yes, he was caught, not just exposed. As the saying goes, you can't always escape unscathed when you walk by the river. What infuriated him more was that he was caught by a boy his age, a boy with an icy, expressionless face. How could Lianzhan, the little master thief, not be upset? Last night, clang, clang. All the things in Lianzhan's arms fell to the ground. He looked up to see a cold, expressionless face staring back at him. Hey, I must admit, this face is quite handsome, Lianzhan thought. The boy with the expressionless face spoke. What are you doing? Who sent you? Lianzhan was bewildered. Who would send someone to steal? Was this boy stupid? He thought to himself. Are you going to answer or not? The expressionless boy signaled to another boy, about 15 or 16 years old, who came forward without a word and stomped on Lianzhan's back. The expressionless boy asked again, Who sent you? The pressure on his back increased, causing Lianzhan to tear up from the pain. He said, Are you an idiot? Who would send someone to steal? The boy's eyes grew colder. He glanced at Lianzhan and then at the things scattered from his arms, his gaze softening slightly. He coldly remarked, A gentleman. Lianzhan was puzzled. A gentleman? The expressionless boy sneered and said, A thief. Lianzhan silently cursed. Why not just say thief? He might not be well read, but he understood that much. How should we deal with him? The boy paced to the main seat and looked at Lianzhan. Lianzhan felt a chill. He had seen many things but was unnerved by this boy his age. Being caught by someone the same age would be humiliating if word got out. Lianzhan tried to escape the foot on his back, but failed. He lay on the ground and begged for mercy. Please spare me. I'm just a petty thief. I won't do it again. The boy seemed not to hear him, still staring coldly. After a while, he signaled to the boy behind him, slowly saying, Kill him, as if disposing of trash. Lianzhan froze, unsure what to do. When he realized, he was being dragged out. He thought he couldn't die yet. What would happen to Wudong, that simpleton? No, don't kill me, he struggled. I'll do whatever you want. Wait, the boy raised his head, watching him for a moment before signaling for the boy to throw him at his feet. What can you do for me? He asked coldly. I'll do anything you want, Lianzhan said, thinking if he could escape, he wouldn't care what the boy wanted. He'd disappear, never to be found. Really? The boy seemed thoughtful. Yes, anything, Lianzhan said quickly, feeling a glimmer of hope. Let him go, the boy said. Sure enough, the pressure was lifted, and Lianzhan ran without looking back. Behind him, the boy smirked coldly. The older boy shook his head, turning away. Lianzhan fled without stopping, afraid the boy might send someone after him. As an experienced thief, he knew how to escape without being caught. Facing the boy, he felt a tremendous sense of oppression. That little ice block must be someone important. He knew the boy wouldn't let him go easily. The question, "Who sent you?" implied complications and potential danger. Lien Zhan ran out of the city, finally stopping to rest in a farmer's haystack. The next day, he returned to the hut, meeting Wudong on the way. Wudong chattered nonstop, but Lien Zhan was too preoccupied to respond. Lien Zhan got up from bed and, not finding Wudong, went to the stream where Wudong was catching fish. They lived in a secluded, quiet place near Shangshui village, known for its peaceful, simple life. He sat by the stream, waiting for Wudong to finish. Together, they returned home, Wudong chopping wood and Lien Zhan cooking. The hut had once housed them and an old beggar who had recently passed away, leaving just the two of them. "Why didn't you come back last night?" "I was worried sick," Wudong asked while eating. "Just tired. Found a place to rest," Lien Zhan replied casually. "Oh, by the way, a new wealthy family moved to Suqing. We should visit them sometime," Wudong said excitedly. Lien Zhan paused. Chapter 2. Meeting again? After eating, Lien Zhan suddenly asked Wudong, "Have you ever thought about going to school?" Wudong froze. Of course, he had thought about it, but given their situation, what could they do? No one knew they were thieves now, but what about the future? Eventually, people would find out. Then they would be shamed and mocked. Wudong looked at Lien Zhan without speaking. Lien Zhan understood Wudong's concerns. He had thought about these issues, but they couldn't keep stealing forever. Eventually, they would be caught. No, he had already been caught. "Wudong, I want to study and learn other skills. I want to gain abilities and one day go to the battlefield to avenge my parents," Wudong said, his eyes red. "All right, let's go to school first," Lien Zhan said. He also wanted revenge for his parents and a life without war. Lien Zhan and Wudong had been stealing and escaping since childhood, honing their skills. Especially Lien Zhan, known as the master thief, who could disappear without a trace. They were experts in escape and self-defense. "All right," Wudong said, sniffling. "Once we can read, we won't have to steal anymore," Lien Zhan said, patting Wudong's shoulder. Lien Zhan had different plans than Wudong. He didn't want to join the army. He wanted to become a government official and help people. Their goals were different, but their intentions were the same. The next day, Lien Zhan and Wudong went to the town school in Suqing. The teacher was an old man they had met before. The school was busy with spring enrollment. From afar, Wudong saw many familiar faces, mostly boys from wealthy families they had stolen from. They never targeted poor families. While Wudong looked around excitedly, Lien Zhan frowned, spotting the expressionless boy and the older teenager from the previous night. Ye Xiao looked up and saw Lien Zhan but showed no reaction, glancing away after a brief look. This slightly relieved Lien Zhan. The teenager, Gu Bei, was more lively today, unlike his cold demeanor last night. "Where's the teacher?" Gu Bei asked, smiling and friendly, unlike the night before. "Inside, probably talking to those wealthy kids' parents," Wudong replied excitedly. "I see," Gu Bei said, approaching Wudong and casually putting an arm around his shoulder. He glanced at Lien Zhan and winked. Lien Zhan was puzzled, but felt somewhat relieved they hadn't exposed him. Soon, the teacher, surrounded by parents, emerged. The parents left, and the teacher and his assistant stood in the yard, watching the students. The teacher spoke energetically, "Thank you all for coming," and the students bowed to him. After the formalities, they entered the classroom and found their seats. Gu Bei sat with Wudong, while Lien Zhan ended up sitting with Ye Xiao again. They faced each other once more, as others had already found seats. Once everyone settled, the teacher began explaining the rules and curriculum, but Ye Xiao and Lien Zhan, deep in thought, didn't pay much attention. "Why didn't you expose me?" Lien Zhan asked quietly. "Do you want me to expose you?" Ye Xiao responded coldly. Lien Zhan felt stung, rolling his eyes internally. Ye Xiao's gaze seemed focused on the teacher, but never left Lien Zhan. Ye Xiao was seeing this mischievous boy clearly for the first time, finding him strikingly good-looking. Lien Zhan turned to look at Ye Xiao, who remained composed. Lien Zhan felt someone was watching him. "How old are you?" Ye Xiao asked, his voice still cold but less so than before. After a while, not receiving a response, Ye Xiao glanced at Lian Zhan, who was listening intently to the teacher. Seeing no reaction, he repeated the question. Lian Zhan was startled. Are you talking to me? Ye Xiao's look seemed to say, Are you stupid? I'm 9, turning 10 in a couple of months, Lian Zhan replied. I'll be 11 tomorrow, Ye Xiao said, looking somewhat forlorn, then turned back to the teacher. Lian Zhan observed him silently, sensing a hint of loneliness in Ye Xiao's words. Was it his imagination? Or did the cold boy seem a bit pitiful? Shaking his head, Lian Zhan said without thinking, Well, congratulations. You'll be a year older soon. Ye Xiao was taken aback, staring at Lian Zhan, his eyes reddening slightly. This made Lian Zhan feel even more sympathetic. What's wrong? Lian Zhan waved a hand in front of Ye Xiao's face, who suddenly grabbed his hand, startling him. He tried to pull away but couldn't, so he let Ye Xiao hold it, despite the pain. Just as he was about to struggle harder, Ye Xiao let go. Lian Zhan rubbed his hand. Sorry, Ye Xiao said. It's okay, but what's wrong with you? Lian Zhan asked cautiously. Nothing, Ye Xiao replied. Oh, Lian Zhan rolled his eyes again, muttering, You're fooling no one. I'm not blind. Ye Xiao heard him and said coldly, You should get your eyes checked. Why? Lian Zhan started but stopped, realizing he was about to flip his eyes again. Just now, he had felt sympathy for the cold-faced boy. How foolish. What's your name? Ye Xiao asked. What's yours? Lian Zhan countered, trying to gain the upper hand. Ye Xiao, he replied. Ye Xiao? Like night snack? I might as well call myself morning meal, Lian Zhan laughed, his shoulders shaking. Ye Xiao's face darkened. Before he could retort, the teacher threw a book near them and shouted, What are you two doing? Evidently, Lian Zhan and Ye Xiao had been so engrossed in their conversation they forgot the teacher. Lian Zhan couldn't stop laughing, even as Ye Xiao's face grew darker. Out, both of you! The teacher barked. Ye Xiao, his face completely black, marched out, while Lian Zhan followed, trying to stifle his laughter. As they left, the teacher muttered, Hopeless.